The Special Frontier Force is a paramilitary special force of India created on 14 November 1962. Its main goal originally was to conduct covert operations behind Chinese lines in the event of another Sino-Indian War. The SFF came to be known as Establishment 22 due to its first Inspector General, Major General Sujan Uban of Indian Army, who used to be commander of 22 Mountain Regiment during World War II, a military crossholder and a legendary figure in the British India Army.Singh commanded the 22nd Mountain Regiment during World War II in Europe and a Long Range Desert Squadron in North Africa. Based in Chakrata, Uttarakhand, the force was put under the direct supervision of the Intelligence Bureau, and later, the Research and Analysis Wing, India's external intelligence agency. History. Ethnic Tibetans have been a part and parcel of the modern Indian Army for as long as it has existed. Independent formations of Tibetan units were to patrol and police the lands they were native to. During the time of the Great Game, the British Indian Army began to employ Tibetans as spies, intelligence agents, and even covert militia in northern India and Tibet proper. At the time of Indian independence, the northern mountain-covered region of India remained the most isolated and strategically overlooked territory of the subcontinent. During the 1950s, the American Central Intelligence Agency and the Indian Intelligence Bureau established Mustang Base in Mustang in Nepal, which trained Tibetans in guerrilla warfare. The Mustang rebels brought the 14th Dalai Lama to India during the 1959 Tibetan Rebellion formation. After the Sino-Indian War and towards the end of 1962, after hectic lobbying by Intelligence Bureau, the Nehru government ordered the raising of an elite commando unit and specialized mountain divisions primarily composed of Tibetan resistance fighters. Tushi gang drug leaders were contacted for recruitment of campus into this new unit. An initial strength of 5,000 men, mostly campus, were recruited at its new mountain training facility at Chakrata, Dehradun. The SFF made its home base at Chakrata, 100 kilometers from the city of Dehradun. Chakrata was home to the large Tibetan refugee population and was a mountain town in the foothills of the Himalayas. Starting with a force of 12,000 men, the SFF commenced 6 months of training in rock climbing and guerrilla warfare. The intelligence agencies from India and the US also helped in raising the force, namely CIA and AMP-RAW. The SFF's weapons were all provided by the US and consisted mainly of M1, M2 and M3 machine guns. Heavy weapons were not provided. Established under the direct supervision of the Prime Minister, the unit under the operational command of Uban, later an AMP-RAW, was designated the Special Frontier Force, and was primarily used for conducting clandestine intelligence gathering and commando operations along the Chinese theater. Initial training was conducted by the CIA paramilitary officers and the IB's own Special Operations Unit. In 1968, SFF, with the help of the Aviation Research Center which provided airlift facilities, became fully airborne qualified and a dedicated mountain and jungle warfare unit. During this period, the Indian government also formed the Ladakh Scouts and the Nubra Guards paramilitary force on similar lines. Many SFF members are Gorkha Rifles members due to the bodies being able to perform much better in high altitudes against others. SFF was later incorporated in the Special Services Bureau of R and AMP-RAW. By late 1963, inter-service rivalry led to severe criticism by the Indian Army. To prove that the SFF's worth, the Inspector General sent 120 men from the SFF for a field exercise, codenamed Garuda, with the Army. The exercise proved to be a dramatic success for the SFF, and the Army was now less inclined to criticize the force. In 1964, the SFF, led by the Inspector General, began its airborne training at Agra. The SFF then began its own airborne training program at Sarsawa Air Base near Saharanpur. By the late 1960s, the SFF was organized into 6 battalions for administrative purposes. Each battalion, consisting of 6 companies, was commanded by a Tibetan who had a rank equivalent to a lieutenant colonel in the army. A Tibetan major captain commanded each company, which was the primary unit used in operations. Females also participated in the force, and they were in the signal and medical companies. During this time, the SFF was never used against its intended enemy, China. However, the unit did conduct limited cross-border reconnaissance operations, as well as highly classified raids to place sensors in the Himalayas to detect Chinese nuclear and missile tests. The organization, SFF, is headed by the Inspector General, who works under the supervision of Director General of Security, Cabinet Secretariat. The current SFF force levels are around 10,000 men. Battalions have a strength of around 900, are composed of 6 companies, each company consisting of 123 men. There is also a force of around 700 Gurkhas in the SFF at any given time. Transport is provided by the Indian Air Force's Saraswati-based 117 helicopter unit Himalayan Dragons, which provides airlift capability with its HAL, Dravs and Mi-17sh transport helicopters. ARC also provides air surveillance facilities through the Chakrata Air Base near SFF HQ. Special Group. The Director General Security, Research and Analysis Wing in 1982 dispatched 500 SFF operatives along with over 500 Indian Army Special Forces to Sarsawa for counter-terrorist training. It is also thought that the selected troopers thereafter were sent to Israel for highly specialized training. These men formed the nucleus of an ultra-elite and highly classified new detachment known as the Special Group. It is a volunteer force, and people are inducted only after a very tough probation and selection process. Alone among the Vikas regiments, or SFF battalions, it is not made up of Tibetans but exclusively recruits Indians volunteering from Indian Army units. The SFF Special Group's headquarters is supported by an intelligence and planning wing, a training wing and a specialist signals troop which is solely responsible for support operations, having 4 squadrons each made up of around 100 troopers, which are further divided into 4 troops. Each troop has a specialized role. The Special Group has a wide range of responsibilities, each requiring specific training and disciplines. Special Group is also the parent unit of elite National Security Guards. The NSG was raised after SG participated in Operation Blue Star. It was thought that a paramilitary force not under the Ministry of Defense should be used for counter-terrorism operations internally. The NSG is thus led by an IPS officer and comes under the Ministry of Home Affairs, even though the commandos who lead operations are themselves from the Army. After the formation of NSG, the Special Group is no longer directly involved in hostage rescue and counter-terrorism training. Most training is still conducted at Chakrata, initial training lasting 9 months and is similar to Indian Army training, with extensive additional courses on guerrilla tactics, mountain and jungle warfare. All commandos are parachute qualified after 5 jumps, with 3 refresher jumps every year. SFF operations. SFF was raised with covert operations in mind, mainly along the Indo-China border. However, SFF has been fielded by R&AMP, and the Indian government in various covert and overt operation theaters. China in 1964 intelligence reports kept indicating that China was preparing to test a nuclear bomb at its Lopnor nuclear installation in Xinjiang. On the 16th of October 1964, China tested a nuclear weapon in Xinjiang. It was expected, but not enough details were known. Later in November 1964, the CIA launched a U-2 flight out of Aviation Research Center Sharbesha Air Base in Orissa, but its return turned out to be a bit of a mishap. The U-2 overshot the runway and got stuck in slushy ground caused by heavy rain in the monsoons. Following the normalization of Sino-Indian relations after Deng Xiaoping's market reform, the SFF ceased most of their operations within the PRC, getting it unstuck and out of India without being noticed by the Indian press. Then even much more subject to leftist influences and hence antagonistic to the USA, was another clandestine operation. This gave all concerned quite a scare, and it was decided to rely on other technical means. So CIA decided to launch an ELINT operation along with R&AMP, and ARC to track China's nuclear tests and monitor its missile launch. The operation, in the garb of a mountaineering expedition to Nanda Devi, involved celebrated Indian climber M.S. Kohli, who, along with operatives of Special Frontier Force and CIA, was to place a permanent ELINT device, a transceiver powered by a plutonium battery, that could detect and report data on future nuclear tests carried out by China. The plan to install a snooping device was hatched far away in Washington, D.C., in the offices of the National Geographic Society. Barry Bishop, a photographer with the magazine, interested Gen. Curtis LeMay of the U.S. Air Force in the idea. The actual efforts called for to place a permanent electronic intelligence device powered by a nuclear SNAP-19C power pack fuel cell. The first attempt to place this device on the Nanda Devi, by a Kohli-led SFF team under the cover of a mountaineering expedition, failed as the team had to retreat in the face of adverse conditions and left the device in a small unmarked mountain cave after having hauled the device to just short of the 25,645 feet peak. When another Kohli-led expedition returned the following year to recover the device, it was found to be missing. In the meantime, the Chinese not only kept testing nuclear weapons at regular intervals but also ballistic missiles. The urgency to gather information was never greater. Another mission was launched in 1967 to place a similar device on the Nanda Cot. This mission was successful, but a couple of years later another problem cropped up. Snow would pile up over the antenna and render it blind. So Kohli and SFF team were sent once again to bring it down. This time they retrieved it successfully. In October 1967, the Chinese began testing an ICBM capable of reaching targets 6,000 miles away. There was renewed urgency to find out more, so SFF mountaineers went off on one more mission in December 1969 to successfully place a gas-powered device on an undisclosed mountain supposedly in Chinese-controlled areas. But by the following year, the U.S. had the first generation of the TRW spy satellites in place and did not have to rely on the old ELINT devices. Bangladesh Liberation War of 1971, SFF was extremely successful against Pakistan during the Indo-Pakistan military conflict of 1971. Elements of the force were sent to Mizoram in late November 1971. A strong task force was deployed and conducted preemptive strike operations in support of the Indian Army formations along the Chittagong Hill Tracts. 1971 saw the SFF being used in major combat in the Indo-Pak War. Elements of the force were sent to Mizoram in late October. By November 1971, around 3,000 SFF members were deployed next to the Chittagong Hill Tracts. With cross-border attacks becoming more frequent, the SFF was then ordered to attack the Chittagong Hill Tracts. For this operation, code-named Eagle, the SFF members were given Bulgarian AK-47s and US carbines. This operation saw the first DAPON, Tibetan equivalent of a brigadier, to command part of the SFF task force. With war right around the corner, the SFF was given several mission plans, including the destruction of the Kaptai Dam and other bridges. The Inspector General urged that the SFF be used to capture Chittagong, but this was found not favorable, since SFF members did not have artillery or airlift support to conduct a mission of that magnitude. After 3 weeks of border fighting, the SFF divided its 6 battalions into 3 columns and moved into East Pakistan on 3 December 1971. After capturing several villages in the Chittagong Hill Tracts, the Tibetans were given mortars and recoilless rifles and also 2 Indian Air Force Mi-4 helicopters. With the Pakistani Lt. General A.K. Niazi surrendering on 16 December, the SFF had lost 56 men and nearly 190 wounded. The SFF was able to block a potential escape route for East Pakistani forces into Burma. They also halted members of Pakistan's 97 Independent Brigade and 2 Commando Battalion in the Chittagong Hill Tracts. For the bravery and courage in battle, 580 SFF members were awarded cash prizes by the Indian government. In 1973, the original Inspector General of the SFF was replaced, and in 1975 a new rule pertaining to the SFF was issued. This prohibited the SFF from being deployed within 10 kilometers of the Indo-Chinese border. This came about after several incidents in which SFF commandos had crossed the border and conducted unsanctioned cross-border operations. They trained the Bangladeshi underground unit Mujib Bahini for the secret missions. For the Bangladeshi campaign, designated Operation Mountain Eagle, the SFF members were issued Bulgarian AK-47s and US carbines. SFF conducted several missions, including the destruction of the Kaptai Dam and other bridges. Internal operations. SFF was used in combating communal riots in mid-1970s and later was used in Operation Blue Star in 1984. It was also used briefly for VIP security. In late 1984, around the Prime Minister following the assassination of Indira Gandhi. Later this role fell upon the Special Protection Group. In 1975 a new rule pertaining to the SFF was issued. This prohibited the SFF from being deployed to within 10 kilometers of the Indo-Chinese border unless under explicit instructions. This came about after several incidents in which SFF was found to be conducting unsanctioned cross-border raids and intelligence operations.